breathing and a workshop called Loving Relationship Training in the 80s. And that's where I met Roland, actually. He was doing his personal self-growth workshops in the 80s in Connecticut. I was doing one in Seattle, and then eventually he moved to Seattle, and that's where we met, in that community. And I would like to read what Sandra wrote in her Facebook post. She's still leading LRTs and teaching rebirthing. She had this little post that just struck me. I'm going to keep drinking water because it's Des Moines and it's allergy season. Here's what her post is. Why am I always stressing the importance of staying on a spiritual path? And I can just, if you knew her, you would just see her. You know, she's got red hair and she's pretty fiery. Precisely because spirituality is one of the highest human needs and leads to ultimate fulfillment. It is your lifeline to your real essence. Have you chosen a path of growth and service? If you want to actualize your real potential, you must do the work of transformation. Okay, let's see. I'm going to stand over here. But it cannot be in addition to everything you do. In other words, it is not like joining the club where you go now and then. It should be your top priority. The goal of spiritual practices is recovery from your fractured self. To me, that's golden, you know. That is just a beautiful, insightful statement. Recovery from your fractured self. There is not a single person in here who is completely whole and doesn't have a little bit of fractured self or a wounded part that we haven't integrated in us. Because when we are completely whole, I think, maybe we turn into light and we ascend. So you use spiritual practices to heal yourself, to solve problems, and heal your relationships. Sandra says, I think people avoid this because it can feel scary at first. Darn right, when you start getting aware and healing, it is scary because it threatens the false life you have made up. I think this is the reason people avoid a spiritual path. Now, this is Sandra's plug. Liberation breathing is a wonderful path because it is fast and effective. Also, you can breathe out any fear. And it's just a practice. It's like a practice of breathing, and you breathe with someone who supports you, and you breathe for about an hour, and you connect your breaths, and sometimes you get insights, and sometimes it just carries away. It does heal stuff. There's a lot of practices like that. Here is the part that's golden. Even more. Okay, this is platinum. Being part of a spiritual community is such a haven and support system. It helps keep you on the path and gives you checks and balances. It is a place to share and recover from any crisis. It gets you out of denial as long as you don't set it up as your family and resist it. Okay, now that sentence alone could be like 20 talks. It gets you out of denial as long as you don't set it up as your family and resist it. You will then get rapid spiritual progress. Love, Sandra. Now, just a minute about that setting it up as a family. It is just how we do it. Everywhere we go, we project our family onto our people at work. We project our family onto our spiritual community, and very often, a minister's job is to be your mother or your father, and to act out something, or act it out the way they do and trigger you just the way your parents do, or to do it differently. That's just what we do. That is part of how we heal, but the spiritual practice makes us aware of it so we don't do it unconsciously. If you ever think, God, that minister is just like my mother, then you can know it's unconscious, and try and bring that back into your consciousness about, well, what is it? How am I projecting my mother onto that person who really isn't my mother? And we do it. That is, it's the beautiful system we do to heal, and we just want to be aware of it. So, I just thought that post was jam-packed with good spiritual stuff. So I want to thank Sandra, because she was one of my first teachers who put me on the path. And I want to thank her for just putting all of that great together. And now I get to talk about envy. I have been looking forward to this chapter. I really appreciate this chapter. Envy, of course, is not a spiritual practice. It's a block to joy. But since we are investigating our fractured self, exploring how envy in our lives is a block to joy is really going to be helpful. And here is what our friends, the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop, say. This first part is from the Dalai Lama. Comparison is indeed human and beyond human. He talks about that even dogs compare. If one dog has a bigger piece of steak than the other, the dog will drop the smaller piece and go fight for the big piece. You know? Comparison seems to be even more than human. But it is a source of great dissatisfaction. There is a Tibetan Buddhist teaching that says what causes suffering in life is a general pattern of how we relate to others. Okay, envy toward the above, meaning who has stuff you don't have. Competitiveness toward the equal, well, I can do this better than you can. And contempt toward the lower, well, you don't deserve it anyway. And let's face it, we all have that in us. Fairness can be hardwired into our genes. So actually, we do not like inequality of any sort. There's a primatologist, Franz de Waal, who has a video of an experiment with capuchin monkeys, our distant relatives. In this video, which you may have seen because it's gone viral, one of the little monkeys gives the experimenter a rock and receives a cucumber slice. The monkey is quite happy to do this over and over until he sees his neighbor give the rock and get a grape. A grape is higher quality food in monkey land. And after the first monkey sees his neighbor getting a grape, he is excited. He gives the rock again. And he gets a computer. He is so mad, he throws the cucumber, not a computer. He throws the cucumber at the experimenter. And he grabs the bars and shakes them. It's like that thing we have about fair. It's not fair. Who had siblings? Anybody have siblings? Do you remember that feeling? Man, it is so not fair. I think that is the purpose of siblings, so we can heal that. It is a part of our nature that we want to deal with and rise above. The Archbishop and the Dalai Lama spoke frequently about the need to address inequality on the societal level. And however much we address the large global imbalances, there will always be people who do more than we do, are more successful, have more, and do less, have less. So we do want to maintain our sense of fairness. Let's use that to create a world that works for all. And let us also rise above it, okay, in our personal life. According to happiness research, upward comparisons are particularly corrosive to our well-being. Envy doesn't leave room for joy. This is interesting. The Archbishop and the Dalai Lama were in disagreement about how to respond to envy. The Archbishop basically came down on the side of acceptance and self-forgiveness. He was saying it's a human part of us. So the best thing to do about envy is to just realize we're envious and forgive ourselves. And the Dalai Lama said, yes, this is all true, and it's really, really important to root it out. And we are able to do it. And actually, I can attest to this. It's one of the first things in my spiritual path in the 80s when I was doing those loving relationship training workshops. One of the first, besides Sandra, I think she did my first training. She came to Seattle. There was a trainers who are a married couple, Peter and Meg Kane, and they were training the LRT in Seattle, where I just got divorced. I'd come to Seattle. I was really ready for some spiritual connection, and I hadn't made the connection I hadn't actually made the spiritual connection. I had made the psychological connection. I knew I needed some help. I didn't want to keep repeating the same thing. But what happened was I went to this training, the loving relationship training, and because of that training, I really connected to my spirit, because that training has a lot of spirituality and a lot of exercises to heal your fractured self. So that was great. But I did the trainings, and I started working with Peter and Meg Kane, and I was divorced at the time, or in the process of getting divorced. I left my husband, who was an engineer in California. We had a nice house in Oakland, and I'd moved to Seattle, and I was like living with my mom and my dad. I think my dad was still alive, and I had a kid, and I drove this crummy Volkswagen van, and I worked part-time because I wanted to stay with Kelly, my son, and Kelly was, like 5 or something. I was going over to Peter and Meg's house to do these rebirthing workshops and spending money and doing things with them, and I started to get very envious. I looked at them and I felt like, man, they are in this big, huge house. They're happily married. They have this beautiful kid, great clothes, and they're doing this work that seems like so much fun. They're leading these workshops and training. And I could feel myself having, like, every time I would go see them, I could feel this feeling rise up of, like, that, how come I don't have that? And I will admit that it was enough in my face, and I'd done enough beginning spiritual work that I realized, this is not going to help. You had better stop this. So I really can't remember how I stopped it, but I do remember that I knew I needed to stop it. So I think the first thing I did was I started praying about it. I said, I need a little help not being envious of this. I know that envy is not going to help me at all, and I believe that, I'm pretty sure I just started praying and got the help. Now, the Dalai Lama has some beautiful practices which help that I want to explain. And I know we all know this one. Excuse me. Gratitude. The first thing you can do to stop envy is to look around at what you do have. My favorite story about gratitude is my first Unity teacher. I was teaching about gratitude, and she said she just had a miserable breakup. She looked around, and the only thing she could be grateful for was Kleenex and Magnum PI reruns. I love that story so much because, you felt that, right? You felt like, wow, what can I be grateful for? Things are so bad. There's nothing to be grateful for. Well, maybe I can be grateful for this Kleenex. And maybe I can be grateful for Tom Selleck in the 80s. You bet. So gratitude really does work. It shifts things. And as I said before, we've had some scientific, me quoting scientists, scientific talks before, where the scientists found that you don't even have to come up with a lot of stuff to be grateful for. It is actually the searching that changes your brain. So every time you look around for something to be grateful for, your brain changes in a way that works to lift you up. And then things just feel better. Here's one thing I noticed. I've been very lucky in my life. I've traveled to some amazing places. I've been able to be on a private house on a beach in Bali, sitting at the deck looking past the pool into the ocean. Oh my gosh, how fabulous is that? I actually when I was in college, I had a gap year in college, and I don't know how we did it. My boyfriend and I found a house on the beach in Hawaii. I'm attracted to beaches. So, I mean, I lived on a beach. I was kind of a shack, but who cares, right? It was a beach in Hawaii. I've been really blessed that way. And the other day, I was sitting in Des Moines and thinking, I wish I was in Bali. And I thought, wait a minute. If you were in Bali, you would be reclining on a chair. I think there's a recliner on the deck. So I went and got on the deck, and I thought, it's about the same temperature. You know, in the winter, this wouldn't have worked, okay? It's about the same temperature. I can have a glass of iced tea. I can have my murder mystery by my side. And I wasn't going to go in the water in Bali anyway, right then. I was just going to sit on the deck. And it's just as pretty. My yard is pretty darn pretty out there. So I reminded myself about what do you really, what do we really, really want? How can we be grateful? God, the creator, all that is, the universe, is so amazingly awesome and abundant that at any time we really can find something to be grateful. I tell you what, it's probably hard to be grateful when you're having physical pain. But I watched Roland be grateful for the nurses. And I watched him not just be grateful for the lack of, them taking care of them. It's like he actually developed a huge compassion and understanding and gratitude for, like, not just the nurse who took care of him, but all nurses and the practice of nursing while he was in pain. And that kind of blew me away. It just blew me away that we can do that. And we can do that. All of us do that all the time because our lives go in and out of suckiness. There's not a single person in here who lives every day on the beach in Bali, so to speak, or, similar. There's not a single person. So that's one of the practices. Here's another remedy, motivation. Hey, it can also be a spur. It can help you say, I haven't got that BMW. Why don't I aim to work and try to get that? So the Dalai Lama says you can turn envy into motivation. And then the Archbishop offered his final remedy. The best thing is to ask yourself, why do I want a house that has 7 rooms when there are only 2 or 3 of us, 7 bedrooms? Why do I want to have it? And you can turn it around in your head to basically a world that works for all, sharing. So giving is also a way out of envy. The Dalai Lama says, envy comes because we are too focused on material possessions and not on our inner values. When we focus on experience or knowledge, there is much less envy. And here is a practice that's even further above that. It is being happy for people to have things that you don't have. It's actually having your heart fill with gratitude because, man, I am so glad my sister has that swimming pool and I don't. Oh, think about how hard that is, That's the next high spiritual practice, and it is worth doing. It is one way of, the Buddhist concept is called mudita, and it is one of the 4 immeasurables of qualities you can cultivate. The other 3 are loving kindness, compassion, and calmness. But mudita is different than just loving kindness. It is actually a quality of rejoicing in the good fortune of other people. Can you see how that changes the game? Like that it's the way people feel when a sports team wins, right? Like it's not like you're winning. What if every time your friend got something great, you could feel excited for them? Like, yeah, our team won again. My friend got a new job, yay! Or my other friend got a raise. Or like I said, my sister got a swimming pool or a hot tub or whatever it is, or a pizza oven. To feel that. That is a beautiful spiritual practice that not only helps you, it transforms the world. Really transforms the world. All right. It is actually the opposite feeling to schadenfreude, which is the word for feeling satisfaction or pleasure in hearing of others' misfortune. So schadenfreude sees us in a struggle against everybody else, so that we, it's like pleasure in somebody else's misfortune. Our spiritual work calls us to be higher. And I'll tell you what, it's interesting to me that last week we had, 3 times as many people in the room, and this week we have a select group. This is a hard spiritual practice to take. I'm just guessing that everybody in here has a consciousness that is actually ready to understand it and accept it. It's not an easy concept to say, I am going to work on being happy for people who have things that I don't. That's a high spiritual practice, or it's definitely on the road. It's not the first thing you start teaching people on the spiritual path. Anyway, I just want to end with a story about people, or a person who practiced that. There's a student in high school, her name was Sarah Herr. She was a high school cheerleader in Bettendorf, Iowa. That's as good as it gets in teen society, right? The prettiest, the most popular girls in school are the ones out in front leading all the cheers. But Sarah went beyond that teen high point. She stuck her neck out to create and train a whole new squad of cheerleaders called the Spartan Sparkles. The Sparkle Effect is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that helps students nationwide create middle, high school, and college cheer and dance teams. In 2008, in Bettendorf, Iowa, the school experienced a string of small miracles and large transformations in the town when we formed the first high school-based cheerleading squad that included students with and without disabilities. 8 years and 15 seasons later, the Pleasant Valley High School Spartan Sparkles continue to radiate joy and confidence. So that's even the further step, not just rejoicing in somebody's good cheer, but helping to create it. And I love that story because it was a high school student in, Iowa, and it was a good example for me. So I have one more thing to say from people who were here last week. Buddy check? Who was here last week? Was your buddy in the room? So funny. All right. Last week, everybody found a buddy, and we had a buddy for the day. So this week, before the end of the day, what I want you to do